Good morning, scholars. Happy Monday. In our animal classification unit today, we're going to be talking about an animal that goes from the water to the land. By the end of this lesson, you'll turn in Monday, October 12th, ELA. We will start off today with our read aloud. We'll read chapter 7. I'll introduce our new spelling words, and then we'll have an exit ticket. Let's start with the vocabulary for our read aloud. Our first word is amphibian. Say it. Amphibian. And that's an animal that can live on land and in water. Shed. Say it. Shed. And that's to drop, cast off, or separate from something, just like this snake is shedding its skin. Transformation. Say it. Transformation. That's changing appearance. So what do these pictures all have in common? They're all the same animal. At first, they're eggs, then they're tadpoles, and then they eventually become a toad. These are the eggs a little closer so you can see the tadpoles in them. We are going to focus on the toad's life cycle today. During the read aloud, I'm going to be asking you to identify some sequencing words. So as you listen today, keep an ear out for clue words from this chart. Sequence explains the order in which events happen. They could be words like first, next, then, after, last, and finally. So let's get started. I'm back, everybody, and today I brought some excellent slides of Tabitha toad and Paolo piranha to show you so we can compare how scientists classify them in the taxonomy of animals. Tabitha is not a fish, but she and Paolo are similar in many ways. It's true that Tabitha and Paolo don't look very much alike, but the saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover. When classifying animals, scientists often search for similarities as well as differences. One similarity between Tabitha and Paola is that, as you know, they are both members of the animal kingdom. You've learned that scientists classify animals as cold-blooded or warm-blooded. Does anyone know to which category Tabitha belongs? Do you think that her body maintains a constant internal temperature like yours, or does her temperature adjust to her surroundings like a fish does? Yes, her body temperature fluctuates, so she is classified as a cold-blooded animal like Paolo. That's another way they are similar to one another. They are both animals and they are both cold-blooded. Now let's take a closer look at Tabitha toad. Can you tell just by looking at her whether she is cold-blooded or warm-blooded? No, but once you learn a little bit more about her habits, you will understand how scientists determine that she is cold-blooded. You know that scientists also classify animals according to whether or not they have backbones. Think about what you have learned about Tabitha's backbone. Yes, there it is. Just like you and Paolo, Tabitha has a vertebrae, a column of bones all down her back. Who remembers what scientists call animals with backbones? Right, she's a vertebrate. So Paolo and Tabitha are both cold-blooded vertebrates. Does anybody remember any other fish characteristics? I want you to make a prediction in your head right now about which characteristics you think Tabitha the toad shares with Paolo the piranha. Do Tabitha and other toads have gills, scales, or fins? Do they lay eggs or live in water? These are rather tricky questions because toads belong to a group of animals that change during their lifetime. Their bodies change, their habits change, and their habitats change. I'm going to share lots of information with you today, so get ready for some miraculous surprises. Before we go any further, I want to introduce the name of Tabitha toad's group of animals. Some of you may know it already. How do scientists classify toads? Yes, they are members of a class of animals known as amphibians. Say it. Amphibians. Most amphibians spend part of their lives in water and part on land. Toads love the water. Like all amphibians, Tabitha began her life as an aquatic animal, living in water. She spends most of her time on dry land now. In fact, she loves the woodlands. but every spring she makes her way to a small freshwater pond in the wetland. First, she will lay her eggs. Just before I took this picture, she laid a few thousand eggs in the shallow water. Toads must lay their eggs in water because their soft jelly-like coverings can easily dry out in the air. Come and see. So I heard a sequencing word, first. What happens first? First, she will lay her eggs. Here's the eggs in the picture. Most of her eggs will never hatch. Can anyone think of why this is so? There are many ways that eggs can be destroyed, by becoming a tasty meal for a predator, being washed away in a flood, or drying up if there's not enough rain. Next, a few hundred toad eggs will hatch into tadpoles. Tadpoles have gills just like fish and use their gills to breathe underwater. They are herbivores and eat tiny aquatic plants, but they're in constant danger because other fish can swallow them whole. So what happens next? Next, they will hatch into tadpoles. Then, the tadpoles will morph or change into very different looking creatures, young amphibians, with very different habits. This transformation process of changing appearance from one stage to another is called metamorphosis. Skin has covered their gills, and they grew lungs for breathing air on land. Tiny legs have also appeared. So then what? Then the tadpole will morph or change into young amphibians. Last, young amphibians will grow into adult toads. Those amphibians that survive to adulthood will be hopping and crawling around on land, searching for food, just like Tabitha. Plant life will no longer interest them. Instead, they'll snatch up bugs, worms, spiders, and slugs with their sticky tongues. Most adult amphibians are carnivores. Some of the toad's larger relatives, like bullfrogs, even eat small mammals and birds. The world's biggest frog is the West African Goliath frog. It is the size of a pet cat and eats other frogs, baby crabs, and snakes. So last, what happens? Last, they become adult frogs. All right. So after toads become adults, they live on dry land. Why do they go back to the wetlands every spring? To lay their eggs. In the read aloud, you learned that a tadpole breathes through gills like fish because it lives mostly underwater. But how do adult frogs breathe? With lungs and through their skin. So, some additional vocabulary we'll cover in our chapter today. Hibernate. This means to spend a season resting or sleeping. Survive. This is to continue to live. And tadpole. It's the early form of frogs and toads that have gills and tails but no legs. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Rattenborough for today's chapter.
Chapter 7. Amphibians. Greetings once again from your pal and animal expert, Rattenborough. Are you ready to learn about another group of animals within the animal kingdom? The group we are going to talk about today is really interesting. They live both in water and on land. This group of animals is called amphibians. The word amphibian comes from Latin meaning both sides of life. Amphibians are classified into 3 more specific groups. Frogs and toads are the largest group. Salamanders and newts make up another. Animals in the 3rd group do not have legs, so they look more like large snakes. We don't know as much about this group of amphibians because they live mostly underground. To understand the life cycle of an amphibian, let's take a closer look at an American toad. Like all amphibians, toads are cold-blooded. An amphibian's body temperature changes as the outdoor temperature changes. Some amphibians hibernate during the winter. Some toads dig deep underground. Other amphibians, like frogs, bury themselves in mud at the bottom of a pond. Hibernating amphibians can survive for months. They do not eat or move, using only the fat stored in their body to stay alive. frogs and toads, and all amphibians, are also vertebrates. A toad's life cycle begins as one of thousands of soft, slimy eggs. The mother lays her eggs close to shore in a pond, lake, or calm spot in a river or stream. But most of these eggs will never hatch. Instead, they will be eaten by fish or other animals. If the water moves the eggs away from the shore and into direct sunlight, the eggs will dry out and die. Out of the thousands of eggs laid, a few hundred toad eggs manage to hatch into tadpoles. A tadpole is very fragile. Its young body is made up mainly of a mouth, a tail, and gills. At this stage, tadpoles are aquatic. Like fish, they use gills to breathe underwater. After a while, tadpoles begin swimming around and eating tiny aquatic plants. Tadpoles tend to stay together in schools, like fish. However, this makes it more likely that other animals will be able to catch and eat them. Most tadpoles end up as fish snacks. If a tadpole survives for a month, skin will begin to grow over its gills. After about 6 to 9 weeks, the tadpole also starts to grow little legs. As its body changes, the young frog or toad starts to look less like an aquatic animal and more like a land animal. After a few months, a toad will make its way out of the water to land. At this stage, it may still have a tail, but that won't last long. By this time, its gills have become lungs. That means the toad now breathes oxygen from the air instead of oxygen from the water, like fish. Soon it will be a full-grown adult toad living and hopping around on land. Adult amphibians are carnivores, eating insects, small reptiles, and even mice. Adult toads are very good swimmers and can even swim underwater, but they cannot use their lungs to breathe underwater. Instead, their thin, moist skin absorbs oxygen from the water. Amphibians are a very interesting animal group. Amphibians are the only type of animal that have both gills and lungs. As adults, they live on land, but lay eggs in the water. The Latin meaning of the word amphibian makes perfect sense.
All right, at this point, you can go ahead and open up today's exit ticket. It's your Google slide under the assignment post. I'm going to follow along as I introduce our new spelling words. So our new spelling words are once again root words that we will modify. This week you will be responsible for spelling the root word and the modified word. So when we add the suffix ed and ing, I need you to be able to spell that version of the word as well. So we know that adding ed causes a word to be past tense. Adding ing makes the word present tense. So let's go through our root words. Write them down as I say them. If you need to pause and type, that is fine. Smile. Rake. File. Vote. Dine. Quote. Raise. Tire. Translate. Prepare. Pause the video here, take a moment, and fill out your root words. When you're done, rejoin us. The next step is to add ed and ing onto each of these words. Today, I want to make sure that you get all of these boxes filled out because you are going to be responsible for spelling them on the test as well. So if the word ends with CVCE, so consonant, vowel, consonant, and then an E, the final E must be dropped before adding ed or ing. So smile, we wouldn't add another E to make ed, we just drop the last E, ed. So S-M-I-L-E-D. Same thing with smiling. We take off the E, we wouldn't want E-I-N-G. So it's smiling. Same thing with rake. We drop the final E before we add ed and ing. Raked, raking. Same spelling pattern with file. Drop the E and then add the suffix. Filed, filing. Again with vote. Drop the final E, then add the suffixes. Voted, voting. Dined, dining. Quoted, quoting. Raised, raising. Tired, tiring. Translated, translating. Prepared, preparing. This week, all of our words, except for our challenge words, are going to follow this spelling pattern. So you drop the final E before adding the suffix. Pause on this point and make sure that your chart matches mine. Fill it out entirely. If you need another minute, please just pause here, go back, fill out your spelling chart. We're going on to the second page of your document, which is your challenge words. These words do not follow the spelling pattern, they just need to be memorized. So the spelling words are does and done. These will be on the spelling test as well. You will not need to modify them. They don't have the suffix endings that match the rest of our words. Just does and done. Fill this out on your exit ticket. And when you're done, don't forget to turn it in. Now, I know that was probably too fast for you. That's why you can pause the video and fill it out. Please do not fill it in halfway. I want you to make sure that you get some practice with these words before the spelling test this week. And that's it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great rest of your Monday.